Imagine a building. Not a skyscraper, not a warehouse, an apartment building, 4 stories tall, with bathrooms, a garage, a medical room. Now imagine it is moving across a battlefield, armed with the guns of a warship. This is not science fiction. This is not a fever dream sketched in a madman's notebook. This is what one engineer pitched to Adolf Hitler on June 23, 1942. And Hitler loved it. Welcome to Redacted Arsenal. I am going to tell you about the most delusional war machine ever seriously proposed by a major industrial power. Not a prototype that failed, not a concept quietly abandoned after 2 meetings, a project personally approved by the Führer himself, backed by Krupp, the oldest and most powerful arms manufacturer in German history. A project that consumed real engineering hours, real money, and real careers, before one man finally had the courage to say, "Enough." The year is 1941. Germany is at war with the Soviet Union, and the war is not going the way the propaganda ministry promised. On the Eastern Front, German tank crews are running into something that was not in the briefing documents, the KV-1 and the KV-2. Soviet heavy tanks that absorb round after round of standard German anti-tank fire and keep moving, keep firing, keep killing. In some documented engagements, a single KV-2 held up an entire German column for hours. 1 tank, 1 crew, hours. This shook the German armaments establishment hard. And at Krupp, a company where the unofficial motto might as well have been, "If in doubt, make it bigger," the wheels started turning. Enter Edward Grote, not a general, not a tank designer, a submarine engineer, a man who spent his entire career thinking about vessels that operated underwater, under crushing pressure, navigating the geometrically impossible. He was Krupp's director and representative for submarine construction, and in 1942 he looked at the problem of Soviet heavy tanks and decided the answer was a land battleship. He called it the Landkreuzer P.1000. The designation tells you everything. P.1000, because it would weigh 1,000 metric tons. That is not a misprint. 1,000 tons. For comparison, the Tiger tank, already a logistical headache that supply officers quietly despaired over, weighed 57 tons. Grote was proposing something 17 times heavier. On June 23, 1942, he stood before Adolf Hitler and laid out the design. Hitler, a man constitutionally incapable of meeting a gigantic weapon he did not immediately want to build, was enchanted. Development was approved the same day. Let me give you the numbers, because numbers are the only language adequate to what happened here. Length, 35 meters for the hull alone, 39 meters with the main guns pointed forward. Width, 14 meters. Height, 11 meters. Weight, 1,000 tons. The hull was longer than an Olympic swimming pool. It was wider than a 2-lane road with sidewalks on both sides. It was taller than a 3-story building. This was not a tank. This was a fortress. Moving. Now. Here is where the engineers walked directly into a wall that should have ended the project before the ink on the approval order was dry. Physics. The designers wanted battleship-grade armor. Understandable. A machine this size and this slow would be impossible to miss from the air. The specifications called for up to 360 millimeters of hardened steel, comparable to the side belt armor of the Bismarck. But here is the arithmetic disaster. Take 1,000 tons total weight, Subtract the engines, the crew quarters, the ammunition, the tracks, the fuel. What remains for armor, spread across a surface area this enormous, is approximately 200 tons. 200 tons of armor for a vehicle with the skin surface of a warship. Do the mathematics, and you get an average armor thickness of 26 millimeters. 26 millimeters. A tank from 1939 carried more armor than that. Every Allied anti-tank gun on the battlefield would have cut through it without ceremony. So, the solution was obvious. Make it heavier. Experts calculated that to achieve actual battleship-level protection across the Ratte's entire surface, the real weight would need to climb to somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 tons. 2,000 tons. At that point, you are no longer dealing with an engineering problem. You are dealing with a geology problem. Grote did not design the Ratte's weapons from scratch. Why would he? He was a submarine man. He knew where the good guns were. He went straight to the Navy. The primary gun turret was lifted directly from the Gneisenau, a Scharnhorst-class battleship. A twin 280mm naval gun turret. Originally a triple mount, 3 barrels, but the middle barrel was removed to save 50 tons and free up internal space for ammunition. So the Ratte's main weapon was, in the most literal sense possible, a battleship gun turret, bolted to tank tracks. Secondary armament, a 128mm anti-tank gun, the same caliber fitted to the Jagdtiger and the Maus. Though where exactly this gun would be mounted was, apparently, still open for debate. Some engineers argued for a rear turret, others preferred the front glacis. Some technical drawings show something entirely different. Even on paper, they couldn't agree. And then, the anti-aircraft guns. 8 20mm Flak 38 cannons, 2 15mm Mauser autocannons, an entire ring of anti-aircraft defense layered around the hull. Why so much? Because even the men designing this machine already knew, at the drafting stage, that it would be bombed within hours of leaving the factory gates. The Ratte required somewhere between 20 and 41 crew members to operate. At that size, it had to be habitable. So the designers made it habitable. Inside, the plans included a garage bay housing 2 BMW R12 motorcycles, kept for scouting missions when the tank stopped. A compact medical infirmary. A fully self-contained plumbing system. The Ratte had its own toilets. Multiple storage compartments, ammunition rooms, fuel reserves. This was not a tank. This was a warship that had run out of ocean. Propulsion came from the Navy as well. 2 options were under consideration. Option 1, 2 MAN V12 24-cylinder marine diesel engines, approximately 8,500 horsepower each. The same power plants used in German U-boats. Option 2, 8 Daimler-Benz 20-cylinder marine diesels, as fitted to E-boats, roughly 2,000 horsepower apiece. Either configuration was supposed to produce 16,000 horsepower total. 16,000 horsepower. And the theoretical top speed was 40 kilometers per hour on a perfect road, which the Ratte would destroy the moment it touched it. The ground pressure alone, 3 tracks on each side, each 1.2 meters wide, would have pulverized every road surface in Europe. No bridge on the continent could support it. No railway could carry it, too heavy and too wide for the loading gauge of any line in Germany, too wide for every tunnel, too heavy for every pontoon. So, how was it supposed to cross rivers? Like a submarine, the Ratte was fitted with U-boat-style snorkels. With 2 meters of ground clearance, the plan was straightforward. Drive to the riverbank, lower the snorkels to supply air to the diesel engines, and walk across the bottom. A 1,000-ton Landkreuzer, crossing rivers on foot, underwater. Grote really was a submarine man to the very end. Before we get to the ending, something must be addressed directly. If you have spent time reading about the Ratte online, and you probably have, or you wouldn't be here, you may have encountered a photograph, a massive gun battery, described, depending on where you found it, as a prototype Ratte turret, installed as a coastal defense emplacement, in Norway sometimes, in the Netherlands in other versions of the story. It is completely false. The batteries in question, Battery Fjell, Battery Øland in Norway, Battery Tirpitz in Denmark, did use 280mm gun turrets. Real ones, and impressive ones. But they came directly from the battleship Gneisenau, decommissioned after battle damage, stripped of her turrets, and repurposed for coastal defense. They have no connection to the Ratte program. Not a bolt, not a blueprint, not a single engineer in common. The Ratte never produced a single physical component. Not one. Early 1943, the catastrophe at Stalingrad has just concluded. Germany has lost an entire army. The strategic situation on the Eastern Front has shifted, irreversibly, in the Soviets' favor. And somewhere inside the Reich's armaments bureaucracy, a man named Albert Speer is looking at a stack of files. Speer was the Reich Minister of Armaments. He was not a romantic. He was not a dreamer. He understood, with cold clarity, that Germany at this stage of the war needed efficient weapons produced in massive numbers. Not monuments, not symbols. Not one single colossal machine that expressed the ambitions of one engineer and the ego of one dictator. He reviewed the Ratte. He cancelled it. No prototype was ever built. No hull plates were cut. No turret was ever fitted. No snorkel was ever tested. The Ratte existed only on paper, in blueprints, in proposals, in meeting minutes from a June afternoon in 1942, when one man told Hitler what Hitler wanted to hear. Speer's reasoning was precise and merciless. The Ratte could not be transported by rail, too heavy, too wide for every gauge. It would destroy every road. It would be destroyed from the air before reaching any front line. And the industrial resources it demanded would have been torn from weapons that were actually fighting the war. He was right. Of course he was right. But this is the detail that stays with me. Grote had his meeting with Hitler in June of 1942. Speer cancelled the project in early 1943. 7 months. For 7 months, Krupp, Germany's most powerful arms manufacturer, devoted serious engineering resources, serious hours, and serious money to a Landkreuzer that could not cross a river without snorkeling, could not use a road without destroying it, and could not survive a single air raid without a miracle. 7 months. Because one man told Hitler what Hitler wanted to hear. And Hitler said yes. The Landkreuzer P.1000 Ratte is remembered today as the peak of wartime megalomania, the point at which ambition completely severed its connection to physics, logistics, and common sense. a machine designed not to win a war, but to feel like winning one. And here is the thought I leave you with. It was cancelled, once, by one man who had to argue his case against the personal enthusiasm of the most powerful man in Europe. One man stood between Germany and a 1,000-ton river-walking, battleship-armed, self-contained lavatory-equipped rolling fortress. The Ratte never existed, but it came closer than it had any right to. And the men who nearly built it were not fools. They were brilliant engineers, pointed in a catastrophically wrong direction by a regime that confused scale with power and ambition with strategy. If you want to unearth more classified madness and forgotten weapons from history, the subscribe button is right there. Every episode, we dig up something that was buried, by governments, by defeat, or by sheer embarrassment. And speaking of buried secrets, our next episode is about a Polish bolt-action rifle from 1939, classified so deeply that the soldiers carrying it were told it was surveying equipment destined for Uruguay. They did not find out what it actually was until German tanks started rolling across the border. It punched through armor that was not supposed to be punchable. Click the video on your screen. I will see you there.